This video is brought to you by Kinetics, your career matchmakers.
When you go into the when you go to the port of entry, whether it's an airport or driving across the border, what are some of your tips and pointers for nurses who are going through that process?
Well, number one, you will have a letter from the hospital or the healthcare provider that's going to employ you in the U.S. Tip number one is, since you're right, the fees are lower for TN than another type of visa, but still, the hospital and the nurse have to pay for this. So it used to be we could only get TNs for a year at a time. And a few years ago, it changed, so it's 3 years at a time. So number one, make sure your employer in their letter says they have a 3-year job for you, because who wants to keep paying and go back and forth across the border every year to do this when they can give you 3 years? Number two, TNs are supposed to have no intention of staying permanently in the U.S., although frankly, a lot of our TN nurses, after they work in the U.S. for a while, they decide, well, this is a lot warmer than Canada, or we like our job better in the U.S. than we did in Canada. Whatever it happens to be, certain communities, like a lot of nurses are from the Philippines, and there's huge Philippine communities in California and some of the other states, and they want to be with their sister, with their brother, whatever. But when the CBP officer, the immigration officer at the airport, asks you, do you have any intention of staying permanently? If you would actually say yes, they may stop you and say, forget it. A TN is only for people who want to go back to Canada. So you just have to say, no, I'm coming for this 3-year job and possibly for an extension, if I like it. But if you start talking about permanent, you're just not going to get into the country. Mm-hmm. If you're down in the U.S. for a few months and then you decide, wow, I want to stay here, well, you can do that, but it shouldn't be your intention when you cross the border.
Okay, so that's important. That's very important for people to note, because I think sometimes what happens is that when you cross the border, then the nurse gets nervous and starts volunteering all kinds of information, and really my understanding is that the officers at the border are really just trying to evaluate, is this a real job, and are you a real nurse? And that's where, in my experience, it's just answer the questions honestly and simply.
Right. Yeah, you want to answer. I think that's exactly right. I mean, so you definitely want to tell the truth. Number two, keep your answers short. They have a lot of work to do, these CBP officers. And if you go off on a whole story, one, they may get a little irritated, and two, you're going to use up a lot of their time, which they're not going to appreciate. And three, although it doesn't usually happen at the border, if some officer decides he wants to be sort of a prosecutor or something, he'll try to catch the applicant for the visa in some contradiction. So if they ask you, like, on what day of the week did you become a nurse, 3 years ago, and you don't know 100%, and I don't know what day of the week I became an attorney in 1973, that's for sure. Just say, I don't remember, that was a long time ago. Don't try to guess. You're not on Jeopardy, the quiz show. You're just answering questions honestly.
Yeah. So being honest, but keep your answers to the point. And just remember that they just, the officers are just trying to do their job, and they're just trying to make sure that it's a real job. And as I say, you're a real nurse, which, you are.